Hi, I'm Mark with Samaritan's Well, and today we're talking about making bids and responding to bids in a relationship. That may not be a term that's familiar to you, but it's very common in marriage counseling and in marriage research. And let me just define what a bid is for a moment. One researcher that's done a lot of work in this area is John Gottman, and he refers to a bid as the fundamental unit of emotional connection. So a bid is something that you're sending out. It's a signal of a need for attention, which of course is the essence of any relationship, is paying attention to each other. It could be verbal, it could be nonverbal, it could include asking for anything from physical affection to help with a project. And we're going to talk about bids and responding to bids, but let me just first give you an understanding. Like if I say, "Hey honey, how was your day?" and she's on her phone ignoring me, she doesn't respond to the bid, then that bid just fell to the ground. Let me give you an understanding of research for just a moment. In Dr. Gottman's research, in looking at couples that stayed together past the 6 years, that's a real critical point for staying together. A lot of breakups and divorces happen in those first 6 years. He found that what he called the masters of relationship responded to bids on an average of 86% of the time, while what he called the disasters, the one headed for trouble, did so an average of 33% of the time. So understand, even the masters, it wasn't that they were perfect. You do not have to be perfect at this. There may be times when you're preoccupied or you're upset or whatever, and you miss something, you don't catch it, you don't respond. But the healthiest relationships consistently respond to those bids, or they turn towards their spouse. The unhealthiest relationships let the bids drop, and that does all kinds of negative things in the relationship. So let me help you understand. We talked a little bit about what a bid is. It's really any kind of, I could be reading an email and sigh really loudly, and my wife's there next to me. That's really a bid that I'm making. And a good response for her would be, "Honey, what's up? Did you get some bad news?" And she responds to the bid. That's a positive interaction. Now, I may be, "Oh, is it okay? I don't want to talk about it right now. Could I tell you in a few minutes? I have got to just think about this for a few minutes." Well, that's okay. Or we might start an interaction and talk about it. But I want you to just understand, the healthy relationships are responding to bids 3 times more than the unhealthiest relationships. It's not a minor gap, it's a huge gap. So making bids and responding in healthy ways is a vital part of relationship. Now, let's look at 3 ways that I can respond to any bid from my spouse. Number 1, I can turn towards my spouse. So that could be a physical turning towards, which is often one of the best things I can do. I turn towards her, I make eye contact. But it's also just an acknowledgement. I could be in the other room. "Hey, Mark, where's my slippers?" And I say, "Oh, I think they're right at the bottom of the bed. I'll get them." That's a great response. And so I respond to her and acknowledge and turn towards her. Of course, I could turn away from her. Okay, we're using that figuratively and literally. But I could turn away from her by ignoring her bid or just missing it, right? We said the couples headed for disaster are either missing or ignoring the bid a lot more than the healthy couples. Or a third way, we said turning towards. turning away, which is missing or ignoring, or I can turn against the bid. This is worse than even, missing or ignoring the bid. This is where I'm rejecting the bid in either an argumentative way, a belligerent way, maybe a contempt. Will you stop asking me to help you? I told you I had a bad day. Uh-oh, that's like the worst I can do in response to a bid. We understand that critical and contempt tears down a relationship. Now, I can make a correction, I can have a complaint, but I can do it in love. What's one of our great verses for understanding bids in a relationship? One of the great Bible verses is James chapter 1, verse 19. So James speaking to the early church, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Now this word hear, one of the definitions of hear is to hearken. It's like I'm attentive to it. And if I really hear something, then one of the best ways I can let you know that I hear is to either respond verbally or, something non-verbally to let you know that I've heard you. Obviously, a lot of times it may be a question. The bid may be a question. And so I respond and answer the question. So I'm letting you know that I've heard you. And so the Bible is like somebody said, "Oh, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we listen twice as much as we hear." But you understand, these bids is like playing tennis. You wouldn't be very happy if you went out to play tennis with somebody and every time you serve the ball, they just let it fall to the ground and go to the backstop. That's what we're talking about. Relationships where that begins to happen, where we've gotten past the honeymoon stage and the bids are either being turned against or they're turning away from the bids. It begins to create this negative perception, or it's also called a negative sentiment override, where I have an expectation that you're not going to handle my bids or my requests or my needs well. So I begin to distrust you, and I begin to either hold those in and not be vulnerable, perhaps go to other sources or other people because you're not as safe, and the disintegration of the relationship can happen relatively quickly. So what happens if you get into the place where your spouse is not responding, or you find that you're not responding to bids well? One of the things you have to do is come back and say, all right, this has been going on for a few weeks, a few months, or, sometimes, God forbid, a few years. One of the things I have to do is acknowledge we have a problem as a couple. I have a problem as an individual in that couple. And one of the things I can do is I can begin journaling about what my behavior has been and what my spouse's behavior has been. And that helps me to start grieving it and owning it. And then, of course, I need to forgive, because almost certainly I've got a built-up of resentment because my bids haven't been received. The trust has been broken down. Now, what's the next thing? After I begin to get a hold of it, that might be a few weeks that I work on that, I need to go to my spouse and say, hey, I think we need to do something about our communication because it seems like we've gotten into this real negative place. Maybe we could spend some time just holding hands and talking with each other about our day. There's some good exercises for that, where we could support each other about our day and try to get back on track. That could be a starting point. But you may be at a place where you need some more help. So you need that mentor couple or your pastor at your church or a counselor. And you might need some help to get back on track. Because as this goes more and more negative and there's less and less bids offered and bids responded to in positive ways, there's more of a need, and it's more critical to get help now and not wait until later. I remember a lady that came in a few years back, And she told me about where her marriage had finally gotten to. And she would come home and fix her dinner, and her husband would come home and fix his dinner, and he would go to his part of the house and she would stay in hers. And the only time they really did anything together was when they went and put on a little show to see their kids or their grandkids. And I said, oh, this is so tragic. Your marriage is not really on life support. Your marriage has been dead for many years. Don't get me wrong. If the husband and wife were willing, we could come in and do everything possible to try to bring that marriage back to life. And we'd have some work to do, but it could happen. I've seen it happen. But it's going to take, of course, the husband and the wife willing to do that. So I want you to really consider that these bids are the fundamental unit of emotional connection. You make a bid out of a desire to connect, and what we're looking for is to turn towards each other. Turn towards each other. A smile, a response, a laugh at their joke. Hey, what's the matter? You seem really upset. When you make a sincere bid, you're making a connection, whether it's small or big, whether it's verbal, physical, or nonverbal. And so I want you to consider that God is in these little things. Do not despise the day of small beginnings, right? And I want you to consider that you can make these bids to your spouse. Reach out and touch them. Reach out and kiss them. Oh, and by the way, for couples, you know what the research says? Have at least one 6-second kiss every day. Make that bid and have that response. It's one of the healthiest things you can do for your marriage. But I just wanted to give you some ideas about this, and I want to encourage you to use this as kind of some understanding of where your relationship is. And I pray that this will help you and that you can be making bids and responding to bids in the healthiest ways possible. Thanks very much. And remember, you can reach us at SamaritansWell.com for anything you might need in areas of counseling and mental health.